In the shadowy alleys of a bustling city, often collide with harsh truths, Javier J. Morales found himself at a crossroads in his life. A small-time criminal with aspirations that soared far beyond his reach, he was a man molded by his failures, anger, and an unquenchable desire for validation. On that scorching summer afternoon, as the sun blazed down mercilessly, he made a choice that would forever alter the course of his life. Little did he know, the consequences of that decision would lead him to a reckoning that transcended the earthly realm. Javier J. Morales was a petty thief with grand ambitions. He had never truly tasted success, perpetually struggling to maintain a job or forge meaningful connections. His temper often got the best of him, resulting in bouts of rage and violence. In many ways, he was the archetypal hothead. Jay was a reasonably handsome man of Hispanic descent, often claiming his roots were Mexican. His thick black hair was carefully styled, giving him a polished look, yet there was an unmistakable air of untrustworthiness about him, an overconfident swagger that repelled most people he encountered. But as previously mentioned, Jay had big dreams. On a sweltering Friday afternoon in summer, the humidity clung to the skin like a second layer. It was an unusual day to dream big, but it was the day Jay decided to acquire a firearm. It was a burner, lacking a serial number or identifying marks. A disposable piece, something to keep by his bedside. He paid a pittance for it, trading a bag of marijuana for the weapon. The seller was clearly getting the better end of the deal. The gun wasn't even guaranteed to fire. Jay had no intention of taking a life. He merely sought the security of having it as a threat for what he was about to do. The jewelry store opened at 10 a.m., and by the time Jay made his gun deal, it was already 2 p.m. He figured the owners, a couple in their late 50s, would be going through their usual routines, complacent and unsuspecting. Hit, grab, and run, he repeated to himself as he crossed the street from his observation point. He quickly donned a balaclava to conceal his identity, drew his pistol, and burst into the store, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Everyone, get down on the floor! This is a robbery! Now! Do you want to die?" Jay had miscalculated. There was only one shop owner behind the counter, and his wife was absent. A second man, a customer, was already on the floor, hands raised in submission. A third person presented an even greater challenge. She was a young woman, perhaps the same age as the man, and she refused to comply with Jay's demands. In a fit of rage, he struck her on the head with the gun. She crumpled to the floor, and the tension in the room escalated, fear swirling like vultures circling a carcass. When Jay hit the woman, the shopkeeper decided he wouldn't allow himself to be robbed that day. He had his own gun hidden under the counter. As he brandished his weapon, chaos erupted. Screams filled the air, threats were exchanged, and then gunfire erupted. The young man saw the shopkeeper raise his gun and, with lightning reflexes, sprang back to his feet. The young woman curled into a ball against the glass display case, hands over her ears. Jay fired first, hitting the shopkeeper in the arm. The force of the bullet caused the man to recoil, inadvertently squeezing the trigger of his own gun. Tragically, the young man was caught in the line of fire, the bullet passing through one ear and out the other. Jay was now completely unhinged. This was not how it was supposed to go down. Blood and brain matter splattered across the walls and ceiling. The young man lay dead in a pool of his own blood. The young woman, shaken by the horror she had just witnessed, bolted for the door. Another shot rang out, this time from the shopkeeper, who did not miss his target. Jay was in the act of shooting when the bullet struck his chest. He missed the shopkeeper and unintentionally shot the young woman, who fell to the floor, lifeless. Jay was not dead yet, but he was losing too much blood. He realized painfully that he could no longer use his arms, and his legs felt like lead. As he looked around the room, he was sickened by the devastation he had caused. This was his fault. He was to blame. Diamonds sparkled behind their glass cases, illuminated by the sun's rays. Jay thought this should have been easy. No one was supposed to get hurt. Jay was dead. Indistinguishable voices echoed in the darkness, a distant droning of something massive far away. His senses were on high alert, nerves twitching from a long sleep. Jay felt sedated. He was as dry as a parched desert. His mind awoke to the torment of his last memory. His chest no longer ached from the gunshot, but from the agony of his conscience. For the first time, Jay understood true guilt. He writhed in misery and self-loathing, unable to expel the demons from his mind. Trembling uncontrollably, he realized he was chained by one foot. He traced the heavy chain back to what appeared to be a stone wall. A dim light flickered overhead, illuminating the room with a distorted russet hue. To his shock, 3 people sat against an adjacent wall, and he recognized them instantly. "Holy hell!" he muttered, recoiling as he sought the darkest corner of the room, but the light was even. The 3 were, in fact, the victims of his botched robbery. They were conscious, sitting with their backs against the wall, staring in Jay's direction but saying nothing. Despite himself, and now feeling cowardly, Jay announced, "I see you." There was no reply. "Where are we?" he demanded almost rudely. "Where are we? We want our lives back." The shopkeeper was the first to speak. He stood, revealing his imposing stature. Very few move against the rhythm of life, knowing that doing so means damnation. A tide of emotion in Jay, intertwining with agitation. The end had come, and no one had prepared for such an exit from the living. It began to dawn on him that none of them had survived his failed robbery. The woman then stood and spoke. 2 thieves hung on either side of Jesus while he was on the cross. To one, he promised paradise that same day. "Which thief do you think you are?" Her tone was biting, inflicting ghastly memories in Jay's already scattered thoughts. The young man stood, his eyes piercing with condemnation. "Where are we? You tell us. You put us here. Dante says purgatory, where the human spirit purges himself and climbing to heaven makes himself worthy. Are you worthy?" Jay fumbled for words. His mind drifted back to something his grandmother had told him when he was young. "Javier, if you do good, good things happen. If you do bad, bad things will come back to you." Her prophetic reminder of right and wrong weighed heavily on his soul, squeezing his mind like a tempest of pestilence, overflowing with a chorus of anguish rattling his every bone. "We are dead, and you are too, but you are the one chained, so figure it out," the young woman said bitterly, as if the devil's minions were traversing the unseen dark. The 4 of them were connected, having entered this holding chamber unaware of the time, date, or even how long they had been unconscious. There was an incomprehensible scrambling of their reasonings, caused by an undelineated evil they could not pinpoint. But it was there among them. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Jay said, "My name is Javier. I am sorry." Laughter erupted from the other 3. "We couldn't care less what your name is," the young woman replied. "I'm just saying, if we're going to be here for any length of time, we should at least know each other's names," Jay said, now standing. He felt as if he had no blood left in his body, but when he stood, an immense lethargy overwhelmed him. He stumbled slightly, regained his balance, and waited for the dizziness to subside. "May the devil have your soul," the shopkeeper cursed. "He's had my soul for as long as I can remember," Jay mumbled. "You are to blame for this. You and only you," the young woman shouted, her voice almost unbearable. "Me? I'll take partial blame. But if the old man here hadn't tried to play hero and shot you, I would have been in and out in a flash, and no one would have been killed," Jay reminded them, addressing the young man who had been accidentally shot. "You shot me?" the young man asked the shopkeeper. "Accidentally. This idiot shot me first," the shopkeeper replied. "He shot you, then you shot me?" The young man seemed utterly confused. "I saw the whole thing. It was an accident, Mark," the young woman said. "Oh, so you are Mark? I finally get a name," Jay laughed mockingly. He sat back down, musing over their predicament. Jay's eyes scanned the room, looking for an exit, but the space was sealed, devoid of windows or doors. He felt anxious and cursed under his breath. Overhearing him, Mark asked, "What is that? Are you praying and asking forgiveness for your stupidity?" Jay spoke with an unexpected eloquence, his words flowing with a memorable cadence. "Prayer? What good is praying to a God who has always let you down? Praying to a God who knows you're lost and never found? Praying on your knees or hands lifted in the air? Praying to a God who doesn't really care? I'll take my chances, do things my own way." Sinatra got it right at the end of the day. Regrets? I've had a few, but if I had to do it over again, I would still aim my gun right at you. An uncomfortable silence followed Jay's freestyle rap. Mark broke the silence. "You're going to rap while we're trapped in this place?" Jay burst out laughing. "You said rap and trapped. Didn't know you were a rapper too." "Oh, shut up, you idiot, before I..." Mark interrupted. "Before you what, kill me?" Jay retorted. "This is serious," the young woman insisted. "She's right. We're all in this place. It's curious but practical given the circumstances that you're the only one chained," the shopkeeper said. "Curious, on purpose. This sucks." Jay's arrogance was palpable, revealing his character flaws. "We shouldn't be here with you. You're a thug. I was buying a ring for my girlfriend. You robbed me of that," Mark cried out. "And I was buying a brooch for my mother's birthday," the young woman added. "Listen, Mark, don't worry. Your girl will find someone else." Jay realized the moment he said those words that it was probably something he should have kept to himself. Mark rushed across the room, unleashing a flurry of punches on Jay, who was caught off guard and defenseless. Jay had to play dead until the shopkeeper dragged Mark away. "Do you feel better now? Were you hoping to kill me?" "Well, I'm already dead, you moron." Jay showed no bruises or marks on his face. In the land of the living, he would have been beaten black and blue. But here, wherever this was, it wasn't paradise, God's bosom, or even hell. If this was eternal life, no one here was impressed. Jay thought, based on his Catholic upbringing, that there should be a last judgment, but he hoped his dear mother could pray him out of this place if this was truly purgatory. "Truce. Let's call a truce," Jay said, wanting to make sense of the illogical situation. The three looked at him in disbelief, for he had been responsible for their deaths. Jay surmised, "If we're dead, which I believe we are, shouldn't we be asleep in a cemetery somewhere? Decomposing and returning to dust? Hades? Shouldn't I have gone straight to the devil? I'm serious. I realize I made a huge mistake, and I'm truly sorry for what I did to you, but we can't change it now, so we ought to put our minds together and figure this thing out. You're correct about one thing. You can't change this, and as far as your apology goes, shove it," Mark barked. "Wow, guess you're not the forgiving type," Jay said antagonizingly. "Before this, I didn't believe in God. I was a proud, educated atheist. Now I don't know what to believe or if belief is even a possibility here," Mark said, speaking more to his two companions than to Jay. "Even I believe in God," Jay chimed in. "That's classic coming from a guy responsible for killing 3 people, whose initials come from the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, passed in 1970, the shopkeeper added. "Shouldn't you be burning in hell right now?" Mark said directly to Jay. Jay replied, "That's classic coming from a guy who just recently questioned his own belief in the existence of God. Hopefully you don't burn in hell anytime soon. I'd like to think reincarnation is real, and I'd hope you come back as something like a cave cricket. They live in caves, never leave them, and feed on mold, feces, and even snail slime tracks," the young woman blurted out with extreme indignation. Mark laughed. Got it! A tube worm. No, a dung beetle." Jay stood, yanking hard on his chain, but as expected, it did not budge. "Face it, you're caught," Mark smirked. "Yeah, don't I know it? And funny thing is, if this is my hell, you idiots have followed me here," Jay snapped. "I don't see an inferno here. No devil, no demons, other than you," the young woman spat. Jay ran his hands over the stone wall, feeling, pushing, scratching at it. He examined it under the dim light, hoping for a hidden door. He turned off his hearing the best he could to concentrate. The others saw him probing the wall, and they began mimicking him, eager to find a secret door or passage, any opening to escape this cell with their murderer. There was no time, no ticking clock, no rise of the sun or moonlight. With their circadian rhythms disrupted by death, there was no way to gauge time. For all they knew, they could have been in this oblivion for either 15 minutes or 15 millennia. Each person felt a gnawing unease, as if something tragic was about to occur. The 4 of them, lost to the underworld, worked diligently to find a way out. But if they did find a way to escape this cell, where would it lead? They didn't take the time to weigh the risks, but the humanity remaining in them sought light. The shopkeeper thought, if this is purgatory, could it be a place not otherworldly, but actually on earth? He began a silent prayer. Prayer was all the hope he seemed to have. Though they did not tire of pushing on the stones and feeling the walls for a quick exit, their attempts mutated into discouragement, leading them to abandon the effort. They would have loved to sleep, but found it impossible. No one felt tired. The realization of degradation, that they had lost so much, was a stark reality. Not only had they lost their worldly possessions, but they also lacked real, thoughtful memories or connections to love. "Is anyone else forgetting things from your previous life?" the shopkeeper asked. Me, I have gaps in my life. I know there's something there, but I can't remember certain things, Mark admitted. The young woman's expression changed as her face contorted in deep thought. Me too, she exclaimed. Contrarily, Jay laughed. You guys all got dementia at once? Lastly, he delved into his memory bank and shockingly realized he too was experiencing anterograde amnesia. He didn't want to admit it, but it was happening to him as well. The cell shook violently, catching everyone off guard. If the four hadn't been seated, they would have been knocked off their feet. What the devil? Mark screamed. Jay, trying to be funny, responded, Exactly. The shaking ceased as abruptly as it had begun, startling everyone. A subsonic droning filled the air. Mechanical gears squeaked with deafening shrills. The creaking of cogs and wheels in need of oil grew louder and louder. The four disoriented souls of this ignominy found themselves on their hands and knees under the wrenching weight of the interminable machine. Impoverished to fight back, they were helpless in this obscurity, now being crushed by overwhelming vibrations of the calling damned. Uncontrollable emotions surged within them. These were sensations they thought they had lost, now assaulting them with mockery, hatred, curses, and humiliating calamity from every angle, seizing them in unspeakable terror. This was the drudgery of hell snapping at them like a shark to dead bait. They begged for it to end, for the incessant clanging in their heads to cease. Drowning in shame, accused and convicted, they were no longer aware of anything. It was a heightened chaos, as if they were going into a war zone where the enemy was unseen and dug in, ravaging them in the process. The vilest thoughts, the most agonizing reels of contemptuous tortures, ran through the cameras of their mind's eyes. With unwanted tunnel vision, they spiraled down, free-falling like limp playthings into an unknown limbo so dark that falling felt more like floating without resistance. The torment seemed to end, but the infringement upon their minds lingered like the taste of wormwood on their tongues. The ground cradled their descent gently, without a bounce or jolt. Brittle flakes of what appeared to be clay fluttered like confetti. This was the first time Jay realized he was no longer wearing the ankle chain. They stood on an enormous barren landscape, reminiscent of an alien planet. There were no hills, no trees. However, a large glowing campfire flickered in the distance, about 100 yards away. Instinctively, the four gravitated toward the fire. As they drew closer, they recognized the shape of a man. He was elderly, shirtless, bony, squatting as if to warm himself. Cautiously, the young woman addressed him. Hello there. The man was lean and very vascular. He let out a sigh and replied, I have been expecting you. Please come, warm yourself by the fire. He never turned his head to look at them, but extended his hand, indicating they should sit to his right. Without question, the four of them did as instructed and took their seats. Javier, Mark, Sarah, and David, he called them by name. You must be wondering what is happening. You must also find the afterlife stranger than you could have ever imagined. The four sat, captivated by the old man's every word. My name is Ignatius. Life and death as you knew it do not apply here. Life and death are joined together in mutual agreement without the war they once waged against one another. Your judgment has already taken place. I am to direct you now according to what was found in your hearts. No one moves on unless they pass through the fire. Ignatius's eyes widened as he spoke. There is a way that seems right unto a man, but that way is death. You may have also heard, the wages of sin is death. In order for you to understand the magnitude of where you are and what is about to happen, what has happened, and what is transpiring now, truth is the catalyst of redemption. Only truth can set one free. Concepts of the living are the conceptions of a people who use perspectives for their rational thinking. I think, therefore, I am. These are the tenets of man's truth, but not truth at all. Take this fire before us as an example. You know fire burns and destroys. If I hold my hand too close to the fire, my defense mechanism will cause me, with no power of my own, to remove it quickly before I am injured. Here, nothing is hidden or concealed. Thus, truth is all around us. Truth comes from deeper realms, where most men never venture to go. Ignatius stood and walked straight into the fire. Sarah screamed. The three men gasped. Ignatius was not harmed. He stood in the midst of the fire, looking at peace with quixotic ardor. If you walk in truth, the fire finds nothing in you to burn. You must not believe the lie of manipulation you have been led to believe. All people live the lie until they realize their true identity. Ignatius extended his hand as an invitation to the rest. In the flames, he looked grotesque, his image distorting with each flickering flame. Fire cleanses, it purifies, it removes everything that doesn't belong. All must go through the fire. You are more than you have ever supposed. You are the center of what creation is. You are the nucleus, the core, the very embryo of life. Believe me when I tell you, you are eternal. You are eternity. His hand remained extended as the flames leaped around him, yet causing him no harm. The four sat, hesitant to accept the invitation. Ignatius's voice grew louder, clearer, resonating with urgency. Surprisingly, the first to consent to the beckoning chorus of voices was Jay. He approached Ignatius, extending his own hand. The flames grew higher as Jay drew near. As their fingers met, Jay ignited like a torch. He screamed as if he wanted the heavens to hear. Ignatius pulled him into the fire, and they stood together amidst the flames, yet unburned. From Jay's mouth, the worms of Gehenna wriggled and squirmed their way from the pit of his being, expelled in a torrent of black rot and corruption, revealing who he truly was. Then, Jay's cries subsided, and in a moment of praise, he lifted his hands over his head, his eyes fixed on something above. None of the others could see what captivated him. Jay experienced his life flashing before him. He felt all the pain and hurt he had inflicted on others. He saw his life for what it was, a lie. Nothing but lies had been the bed he slept in, the food he consumed, the relationships made and broken. He was awakening to a truth he had never known, and in this moment of rapturous relief, the clutter of his life burned away, and in a brief moment, he believed he had been reborn. Weightless, his body lifted from the dancing flames, and he was carried away before their eyes, vanishing from sight. Ignatius remained in the swirling fire, his hand extended again. "I want to see my wife again," David said. Jay had been exuberant, and it seemed as though he had passed some of that joy on to David. He trembled as he approached the ring of fire. As his fingers touched Ignatius's hand, he, too, ignited like a ball of fire. The flames turned white, then blue, and he did not cry out but burst into tears of joy and happiness. Ghostly, transparent figures appeared, encircling him like a vortex. He, too, lifted his arms as if to say to whatever force had carried Jay away to take him too. The love of his life at times had been the diamonds, the jewelry, things that would lose their luster over time. In this moment, none of that seemed important. He felt as though some spiritual manifestation was restoring him, making him whole. As David drifted out of sight, Mark stepped closer to the ring of fire. He had been an unbeliever in life, never considering the existence of a spiritual world, an afterlife, or even supreme beings. He had believed in the possibility of other life in the vast universe, but had imagined a big bang or some explosion from nothing that created something, allowing life to evolve on other planets. But now, all his theories were being dispelled. As David, light as a feather, floated away in the same manner as Jay, Mark stepped into the ring of fire. He let out a scream and exhaled what Sarah could only define as an agonal breath. His shoulders slumped, and the truth of his life was revealed. He was overwhelmed with shame, denial, guilt, and condemnation like he had never experienced before. Ignatius scooped a flame and held it in his hand like a ball. He then pushed Mark's head back, opening his mouth. The ball of flame was gently rolled from Ignatius's hand and dropped into Mark's mouth. Mark's eyes opened, and fire beamed like lightning from them. There was a release of doubt and unbelief at that moment. Mark rose above the ring of fire and, too, drifted out of sight in a plume of pale smoke. "Sarah, take my hands," Ignatius spoke, reaching out of the flames toward her. After all she had witnessed, she did not want the pain. "What if it hurts?" she thought to herself. A voice whispered in her ear, giving her confidence. "I will snatch you away, I promise." Sarah took Ignatius's hands and entered the ring of fire. At first, she thought she felt as though she was being burned, but then realized she was learning forgiveness. The two began to turn in circles, almost like a dance. They spun faster and faster until together they levitated gradually out of the burning ring, creating a fire whirl that spawned a massive vortex, climbing high into the ethereal heavens that awaited the untethered pair. The ring of fire extinguished itself for the moment. Victory over death is not an easy fight and can be phenomenally frightening. Yet, coming to terms with the truth is the facilitator of our freedom. We will all stand in this place where we are eye to eye, toe to toe with death and all its dark marvels. But it is just as easy to believe in life and embrace it as it is to believe in death and succumb to it. Ours is an eternal life. It starts now. Who is worthy? In the aftermath of that fateful day, the echoes of Jay's choices reverberated through the lives he touched, even in death. The fire that consumed him was not merely a punishment, but a transformative force, a crucible that forged a new understanding of existence. As he and the others ascended into the unknown, they left behind the shackles of their past, stepping into a realm where redemption awaited. Ignatius, the guide through the flames, became a beacon of hope for lost souls, reminding them that the journey through darkness is often the path to enlightenment. Each soul that passed through the fire emerged renewed, shedding the weight of their sins and embracing the light of truth. In the end, the question lingered: who is worthy? Worthy of forgiveness? Worthy of love? Worthy of a second chance? The answer lay not in the past, but in the choices made in the present, in the willingness to confront one's demons and emerge victorious. For in the realm beyond, every soul has the potential to rise, to be reborn, and to find their place in the eternal tapestry of existence.